Hi, this is a steel cooling tower for a Welsh hospital, and this video is about how I took that steel cooling tower and how I've been trying to change it into something that's capable of crossing oceans. Like everyone, I hoped that 2021 was going to be a great year. Unfortunately, it did not get off to a great start, with various variants in the UK and Brexit leading to us not being able to go anywhere for 4 months. Nevertheless, in April, I managed to get a little bit of a window of opportunity, and I grabbed it and ran to the port. Not, of course, before getting my PCR test and all the various bits of paperwork to enable me to travel.
In the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, France has imposed a curfew. All travel between 7 p.m. and 6 a.m. is now prohibited, except for long-distance transit journeys.
So just to prove what a relentless silly moron I am, I'm doing another bow modification. Only a slight one. I'm just sticking this piece on here. I'm putting a piece down here to improve the angle of entry. I'm trying to get an angle of entry a lot tighter, to the sort of level where you're talking sort of 25 degrees or so. So I'm going to put a little piece on here, and then the panel's going to come back, and then it will curve into the existing hull. It's a bit of a mess around, but it's a day's work. What else am I going to do with my time?
As always, my little prediction of a day's work did not really quite pan out, and it ended up taking, I think it was about 2.5 days to do. And certainly there seems to be a rule of thumb. Take whatever however long you think it's going to take, and double it, and you might be close to what it will actually happen. Now, of course, you might be thinking, not unreasonably, why on earth am I cutting open a perfectly serviceable bow and doing all this work again? And the answer is, I don't know. Blame COVID. That must be what it is. I've just got lockdown fever, and I just felt the need to chop things apart and re-weld them and do this sort of stuff. After all, it's great. It gives you a sense of direction. You get your plasma cutter out, you get your welder out, you get your grinder out, and you start chopping things around. And after all this time sat in a little room working from home and being stopped by prime ministers and being stopped by vaccines or lack of them, or all the various variants that we've had and everything, to suddenly have control and just be able to go crazy actually felt quite good. Of course, there probably is some sort of logic in what I was doing. I haven't quite figured out what that is, but well, to be fair, I mean, the thing is it will give me a better angle of entry on the bow. It will tidy up a couple of things that I've noticed after the last few sort of runs at sea and everything. And I did it because I could, because it was there. There you go. Anyway, as always, I had to crack down into the work, get the various tools out and get running. As you can see here, I'm making sure I clean off all the steel to a really, really clean surface. I've heard people talk about things like welding into paint and welding on a dirty surface. I guess I've probably done that a couple of times because I had no choice, because it was too difficult to get the last bits of dirt. But I'd always try and get as much out as possible, because otherwise you will get inclusions in the weld and dirt that will come through. As you can see here, I'm trying to bend the 3mm steel plate. Now, I've found that this stuff bends up quite easy with a bit of persuasion from a nice big hammer. Here I'm using a boat cradle on the other side of the sort of enclosure to bend it, and I'm literally just stick it underneath there and yank, and do wonders for my back. It's a great thing to do to your back, to just suddenly yank really hard on a piece of steel plate while you're bent over. It looks a little bit rough there, the plate, but in actual fact it is absolutely almost perfectly smooth by the time it's finished and welded on. I think that's because the weld pulls it around a little bit too, and it's actually quite a nice finish. Here I'm just tidying up a little bit of a problem I had where I had a little bulge in the plate. It's one of those jobs that you look at and you think, oh, that's going to take 10 minutes, and then you think, oh no, it's not, it's going to take 2 hours, and then it ended up taking about 5 minutes. and it's quite satisfying as well. It's been bulging out and annoying me for some time. So in my view, this really was a sort of opportunity to tidy things up and just make them a little bit more how I want them to be. Racing through to work, I then raced the grinder straight into my hand. So now I'm sporting a plaster, which of course slows down the work, and is also quite painful. It's sort of stick to the skin. It actually took about a few weeks for this cut to repair, because basically the skin had to grow in from the outsides back into the center point. Not very nice. Wear gloves, that's the answer. Now you might be wondering what the little shelf is that I've always had on the bow there. It's brilliant. It's somewhere to stick your hammer, like this, or a cup of tea, or anything you've dropped, like your car key, and then you stick it there and you know roughly where it's going to be. It does also serve the purpose, by the way, of when she's in the water. It works as like a first step to actually being able to get out from the bow. So I can actually put my foot on that plate there, on the plate that's halfway up, and get onto the front of the bow without too much effort. How I'll feel in another 20 years' time trying to jump out the bow like that, I don't know, but at the moment it works really well, and it's a useful entry-exit method on the boat, particularly when you're drying out. It also serves just to keep the water, spray the water away from the side of the hull and give you a little bit of a drier ride. Now this is a cute little sound. The only problem is this little bird will come and do this every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning and wake me up. It was driving me crazy by the end of 2 weeks. Next to a more logical job, which was repairing a bit of the deck section here. So my old steel box section in a couple of places had rusted quite badly, so I replaced it with this nice new shiny bit of stainless steel. Cutting out the old steel and welding in nice new stainless steel is arguably quicker than trying to remove any rust or doing any small weld repairs on the deck. And of course the great benefit of it is as it's stainless, it's not going to happen again. Little trick I found when struggling with little bits like this that you can't get the grinder or the wire brush into, and you've got to get rust out of there, is if you use a drill bit. Now you must use a full face mask with this, because if the drill bit goes, obviously it's going to snap up and it will hit you in the face. Obviously this is not very good for your drill bit, but it really does get into those areas otherwise you just can't get into. As I say, I'm a great stickler for trying to really make sure that I prep for paintwork. So the next stage, once I've done this and got absolutely everything out that I can do with the drill bit, is to get the Karcher out again. So I've been Karcher pressure washing, shot blasting this, and I'm impressed by the finish. Obviously I did a lot of prep, but it takes out the last bit of rust that is so difficult to get out. So my little pressure washer and the water pressure that we got at the marina is not enough to clear off large rusty sections. But for getting those little bits out that you just can't get with drill or grinder or anything like that, and just giving that last bit of profiling, this works really well. The only thing about pressure washing is you get a little bit messy. Not quite sure how messy I am, I can't quite see, but yeah, it's a lot of mess. But what you're going to do, but here's the thing, you get quite a nice finish, and that, once pressure wash dried off for the joking, is good. So that all looks good to me. I've done all underneath the decks, all along here, apart from the fact that it's very messy. No one knows that I've been Karcher wet blasting. Now if this were dry shot blasting, you'd still have all this mess, but you'd also have to have all this sheeting to cover everything in, and then you'd have to deal with loads of people complaining at you and probably trying to stop you from doing it. Whereas this, once I'm clean, no one will know. A bit of black dust on the ground, which no one really knows what it is. Nothing wrong with it anyway. That's good. Yeah. One job I had planned for this trip was to possibly do the Outrigger modification on the other side. I'd done this side the last trip that I came over on, but obviously I'd only done one side. So I cut a hole ready so I could access into the Outrigger, but shortly after doing it, I don't know, I wasn't particularly happy with the Outrigger modification in the end. So I decided what I'll do is I'll just finish sealing up this hole, because I wanted to stick an anode in there, and test the boat before I go and do the other side. So to test the curvature, to make sure I've curved up the new bit of plate properly, I just sort of smack it on the side of the hull here, just to see where I need to tighten it up or take some of the curve out perhaps. And then once it's all ready to fit in the hole, I try and make it so it fits exactly in the hole, because then it's just so much easier to weld. It really is. You know, if you have it slightly out and then you try and fix it while it just gets difficult. I've always found just make it exact as you can, and then stick the thing in and try and weld it in.
Completed all the tacking round here, and it's now completely nice and flush and done like that. I've done this weld down here, and then what I have to do is I have to grind a little track in and a track out, and then fill in these bits, and with this I'll just grind almost through and then just weld straight over the top. So it will look a bit like this. So you've got a track in to where you're going to start welding, and then I've almost ground that out, almost ground most of this out. I probably will take that last little bit off actually, and I'll carry on and then do exactly the same here, track in, track out, all the way down to here, and I'll try and do that in one nice long continuous weld. So this is 3mm and this is 6mm. I suppose I'm running about 170 amps at the moment in here to take the 3 to the 6, but then when I go inside I probably won't need any more than that. I could use up to 200, but it's probably overcooking it a bit. But then I'll do a nice weave on the inside, so actually I'll use a little bit less power anyhow, so I'll stick with the same 170 amps and do a nice weave, because the 6 comes like this, then there's a step to the 3, giving me this little sort of corner junction. I can just get a nice weave weld all the way around. So I have a weld on the outside, weld on the inside. Afterwards I grind the welds almost flat, and that gives me a chance to see if there's any imperfections, because they'll shine up as you're grinding them. They sort of go very sort of blue, or just appear as little pinholes. Yeah, so I'm in now in a tent because the wind is blowing so bad, like that. I mean, that's really frustrating, does that? And I've realised how the wind works. Essentially, when I pull the trigger on the gun there, the wind blows. That's how the wind works. I have that power, or rather I have that curse. Right, we're all welded now on the outside and grinded back nice and tidy. I've just checked and there was actually nothing, no pinholes came up. And I've just done the first internal weld. It's left this nice blue mark where the heat's got into the steel there. Now this is what it looks like inside. So I'm going to put my cap around here, and afterwards it will look like that. So relatively nice weave, covering up the distance from the 6mm to the 3mm and taking up a little bit of a thing there. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pause on the 6 so it gets the heat, and then flick it into the 3. Because obviously that needs more heat than that to get the melt in. This is my welder that I use. It's an Oxford 200 amp on single phase. That's the sort of wire feed motor you want. A big chunk like this. I've seen welders with titchy little record player things, and they don't work well. I found out years ago. So there's a 15 kilo reel of wire. Just push between these two little rollers here. Just adjust the tension. I've had to turn it down on my stainless wire because it kept on getting like a bird's nest here, where it suddenly push and get stuck, and It's unusual for that to happen in 0.8mm wire. I'm not quite sure why it's happening. But anyway, I've turned the tension down and then the stainless was working fine. This is standard steel wire, SG3 I think it is. So this is your big transformer. The thing's on, so I really shouldn't put my hand in there. You've got some smoothing capacitors, and the rectifiers and all the switches there. It's quite a simple machine, but pretty strong and robust, which is good.
So the panel welded in, it was time to make these little anode carriers. So it's a bit fussy this, but basically I don't like having the anodes stuck outside. You know, they don't make much drag or anything like that, they just look untidy. No, I don't know. I got a welder, so I might as well do these silly things, you know. But so I've made this little box here basically that I'm going to weld into the panel. And it means the anode goes in there and it's flush on the surface and looks nice and tidy.
Right, just about to weld in my anode bracket, box, whatever you want to call it. So I've just cut the hole in my nice new plate, and this is the reason why I did this whole plate. I had to cut a hole and I thought I might as well take some weight out while I'm there. I've just got to bring it through the plate and then get it welded because I am against the time. Got a COVID test tomorrow and ferry on Saturday, and I've still got to get all this painted. Bit of a nightmare. So this is the anode, welded in. I've got this hook here, so I can tie stuff down, and I've put this bit of stainless around here, simply because I can paint up to this. And alright, I might chip it down here and here, but this would be the most likely place that would get chipped paint. So there's going to be not really any paint on there because it's just going to be painted up to the edge of stainless. I suppose it will act like a little step for me to get in and out, so because I do struggle. I'm thinking though I should probably put a step on this pole here, and I might do that at some point because it is a real pain trying to get in and out of these sometimes. But all I've got to do now is wire brush all of this, clean it off and get a coat of paint on it. It's done. So this little idea here is quite simple. Anode goes in like so. I won't push it all the way because the paint is still soft, but it sits in there flush. It's a bit arty-farty really. I suppose it took about 4 hours, but I had to weld something back on there to put the anode back in. Whether it gives you any sort of reasonable gain reduction in drag, obviously not really. I mean, it would be 0.000 something of a knot. Not terribly impressive or anything like that. Looks a little bit tidier. This is what happens when you use Treadmaster straight on steel. Well, I say straight on steel. You use normal paint underneath the Treadmaster and then you stick the Treadmaster on top of the normal paint. And I used the contact adhesive around the edges. And basically after a long time the rust gets underneath the contact adhesive, and because I've used normal one pack paint it's not held up as nice as it should. What I've had to do then is I've had to cut all the deck all the way around back to good Treadmaster. Still on one pack paint, but it's fine, it's really good because it's epoxy glue underneath this bit. And then try and get rid of the rust, and this rust has got really bad. I mean, it really went deep in there. So I've been using grinder and then I've been using the drill with a drill bit in there. It's on the verge of you have to replace the panel, but it's not particularly structural. So far I've been okay. I'm just working through this last little bit down here and then I've got to get the paint on. I've had my COVID test. Yeah, no, I've not got COVID. I'm on the ferry tonight, so I need to get this paint in. It is bitterly cold this morning. I've had to get on, so what I've done is I'm using Jotun winter grade, which you can apply down to 0 degrees, freezing essentially. But I've used a heater in the patches that I've had to do because there was a bit of ice on the deck, so I just left the heater on a patch for a few minutes and then painted, then moved the heater and then painted, and hopefully it means I get everything done before I go.
And that brought me to the end of that trip. So, as normal, I went back to the UK, I sat in quarantine for 2 weeks and tried to recover. and just look forward to the day when I could return and get it back out to sea like this. So thanks very much for watching, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe if you'd like to. That would be great. Thanks.